If you'd like to participate in the discussion or leave us feedback, you can contact us at levelupyourgamingpodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook at facebook.com/levelupyourgaming. If you like the content and want to hear more of the show, subscribing will ensure you don't miss an episode. New episodes come out almost every Wednesday. Also, please review, tell a friend about the podcast, or share with your gaming group. Now sit back and enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Level Up Gaming Podcast. My name is Aaron, and joining me once again, I got Josh. Josh, how you doing today?
I'm glad the holidays are over.
Yeah, I am too. It's been a busy season, and it's
No kidding.
much better on the other side of it here in the new year.
Yes. There's a whole spending time with family and getting to see friends and going to events. But man, I think we had stuff planned like every single weekend, and like sometimes different events on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for the entire month of December since Thanksgiving on.
That time of year, man, that's when people start to get together. It's just sort of ingrained in everyone.
Yeah. Well, it's the holidays, and that's just a thing. It got me thinking about storytelling, and specifically, because we spend so much time with our families telling stories and like, what did you do last year? How were things? We haven't seen you since the last holiday event, and which is mainly the reason I don't like going to them, because I don't want to keep telling the same story over and over and over. Right?
Yeah.
But I was thinking about telling stories, and I was thinking about holidays. Holiday comes from holy day, and I was thinking about religion in our storytelling.
Okay. All right.
Which
yeah,
is
no.
kind of a topic that most people don't want to like really get heavy into, but I think that you can tell some really great stories using religion, especially in fantasy settings, but also eldritch horror, modern fantasy, sci-fi. Can have a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, you think of a lot of like the like some of the quintessential horror movies. They have a religious tone to some of them. Exorcist, for example. And in a fantasy setting, you have paladins, and you have in D&D, you specifically have religions that dwarves follow, and you've got religions everywhere. You have the gods and like your scions that are
Exactly
part of the like the pantheon that exists there. And I think that's there's a lot of fun to be had with that. There's also systems in White Wolf like Scion, which is literally like the pantheon of like the Greek and the like the voodoo and all the different these different like polytheistic religions. That's it. That's what I'm looking for.
Yes. Well, okay, so let's talk about different types of religions, because I think this is the first stepping off point when you're talking about fantasy or just any tabletop game, is that out here in the real world, a lot of the religions that we're familiar with, like almost all of them, are monotheistic. That means that there is one god the followers believe in. The followers of that religion, there's the one god, and that is the god. Even when there's multiple gods, it's kind of somehow sort of one god. And that god is sort of in charge of everything.
Yeah. I mean, again, that's that's kind of the common religion that you have right now today. You're not back in the Greek gods when you had, all the, Zeus and Hades and, Athena, all the gods that are out there.
And Hermes and Hades, and that would be polytheism. Polytheism meaning that the followers believe that there are multiple gods, but and that each of those gods may be in charge of a different thing. They have their own like little domain. Believers don't necessarily have to worship all of the gods. They may focus on a specific or singular god, and those are the really. This is really where a lot of our fantasy games take place.
Yeah, a lot of fantasy games have polytheism or just generally different religions within the game. So even if they are more monotheistic, they have you have multiple religions with all different gods, but there is sort of like this overarching polytheism, which is like they all really exist in like their own realm.
Yeah.
So,
but their worshippers only believe in the one god.
yes.
Followers of the other god are bad, and that's fun too, because you can have like wars between the gods fought by your people. And polytheism is, that's the classic D&D. That's a lot of even old fantasy stories. They follow the sort of, the ancient ones, or those that have the power, and they have the power over a specific domain that makes them a god. That's sort of the somebody ascending to godhood, is they have enough power to amass their own little domain over that area.
Yeah, you can go and look at like even like in low fantasy like Game of Thrones. They have the big religion, like the new religion, and then they've got all the old religion, the old gods, and like the faceless god, and like
Aaron, do you remember the new religion?
it had 7.
It had 7. There was 7 of them, and that that's very common with a lot of fantasy games. And this is very fun because you can have people interacting who are they understand that there are other gods, but I only worship this one, and you only worship that one, and that means we have to fight now. So that can be a great place to start a story, or to have a story. There are other types of religions. You have monotheism, you have polytheism. There's also animism. And I looked it up and to make sure I was pronouncing it right, and I'm very certain I mispronounced it there, but that's fine. Everything has a spirit, not just animals, people, but also plants, the earth itself, natural phenomenons, emotions, all sorts of things can have a spirit, and they interact, and you sort of have to. A person who follows or believes in this is more holistic in their world. I was thinking about this like, oh man, this is like, some tribal, some sort of, no, Jedis. These are Jedis. There is an underlying spirit that permeates every living thing existing in the universe, and they are one with that. That's a Jedi.
I'd argue the Jedis are more mindfulness, but
but they believe that everything has a spirit.
Yes, they believe there's an interconnected like thread of life beneath us all, and that's the Force, and that's the
which works really well in here. So when you think about some of these ancient tribal religions, or that everything has a spirit, going with Jedi, that's an excellent fun thing. And the entirety of Star Wars is, if you think about it this way, kind of a religious movie that way. I mean, Jedi is, one of those massively popular religions in the UK and in Australia, I think.
Is it?
Yeah, it's like it was one of those big growing ones too. But that might be one of those where you're required to pick a religion on like some form.
Okay. So this is like where you get like the Apostafarianism sort of
exactly.
Thing. Okay.
Yeah. Apostafarian, of course, leads us to the last one: atheism. People that believe that there are no gods.
Yes.
Which is,
or there's also like agnostic, which is you believe there's a god, but you don't ascribe to which one actually exists. So.
Or like things are weird that could be a god, but I'm not really into that sort of thing. Atheism is very funny in a fantasy setting where you can meet them. Like, I don't believe in gods. Hi, I am a god. No, you're just a dude. You're just a dude with a lot of power. Because honestly, that makes a lot of sense too, to me. if you can meet actual gods in a fantasy setting, but also you've got wizards and you've got druids that can like lift mountains up and throw them at each other. What's a god? It's just another person with a lot of power.
That's true. Again, in a fantasy setting, you could easily mistake, a god for somebody who's not a god. Because I think
for the wizard Jeff, and you're just like, is he a god? Did he get a really, really fancy amulet?
Because if you strongly look at like the arc that a lot of players will end up taking, by the time you hit like max level or like the end of your extremely long journey, or if you just keep kind of journeying, you almost become godlike in the way.
Yeah. Well, in the earliest editions of Dungeons and Dragons, they had the books that eventually went into gods and deities, where you could actually level up to those levels and get those, massive powers. And it was very much the polytheism where you'd pick a domain and you'd sort of take over that sort of thing. But
it's also a very popular storyline in a lot of D&D campaigns or a lot of tabletop games in general. Like, I know I've heard that storyline come out of like a lot of live action role play for World of Darkness, where somebody ascends to like godhood or some sort of like celestial domain, and in D&D where somebody ascends to a god. And
it's so popular. It was a key focus in at least 2 of the Critical Role storylines. So I'm just putting it out there. So yeah, you've got a couple of different options for religions. And we keep talking about this, religion in a fantasy world. In a lot of these games, in a lot of these stories, in a lot of these worlds that we talk about, the gods are real. Like, it's not a belief system so much as I met a guy, right? Or he showed up.
I met the guy. It's actually very much closer to like the Greek mythology, where like the gods would walk amongst the humans and like and it seduce humans and have them do their bidding and all sorts of stuff. So
exactly, you can meet them. They do things. They have tangible wants and needs where they come up to you and they tell you, "This is what I need you to do," and they give you stuff. They give you a mission. They give you an object. You've got classes that get their powers from those people, from those gods. And so it's not like they exist in an ethereal way. They exist in a very tangible way. And when you think about it in that sense, including them and their beliefs into your story can make a lot of sense. I think I know I've done this in some of my games, is that you've got clerics or warlocks or paladins in like Dungeons and Dragons, where these people are supposed to have these strongly held beliefs, so much so that they garnered powers from this. Sometimes with the warlocks, they've made a pact with this ancient being.
That's like the whole thing about a warlock.
And you're just like, yeah, that's great. We're just gonna do my story. I'm not gonna bother with your weird religion. And we're just gonna go for it. But I think for a long-term game, for any sort of like real quality role playing for that character, to really explore, hey, you've got this, strong religious tie. Let's go into it. What does that mean for you? How does that influence your interactions? And you're right. There's in like dwarves follow certain gods, elves follow other gods, whole regions or cities or specific races, they could follow specific deities, and they can even have warring deities. You can have wars between different followers, or there could be like, if you're a cleric, adamantly hates followers of this other god, that may be a problem. That may be something you want to bring into your story. Sow conflict. Have fun with it. Give them options.
Yeah. No. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. That's go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, like that's it. It's an additional layer of storytelling that you can add on to things. Like if you want to give, specifically, if somebody is playing one of those classes, it allows you to shine the spotlight on that player in a way that you can't on the other players in the game, and so it lets you incorporate, additional storylines that you might not be able to incorporate if nobody was any level of a religious character. And even if they are all non-religious characters, let's say they're all atheists or whatever, you can still incorporate the God angle by having, the God walks amongst you, pleads with you, asks you to do their bidding. Okay. And they could be, anybody. They could be just like the person who hands you the first job that you take. Okay. Like they can literally be anybody. And it depends on like what you want your overarching story to end up looking like, but it definitely adds a layer of flavor and intrigue into a game when you're able to incorporate, somebody, some divine being showing up and, having you do their bidding, but you might be doing it willingly or not willingly. It depends on what, the aspects of your character.
Mm-hmm. And I think it'd be, because divine beings, because gods in these settings have such a variety of powers, and they exist within certain domains, so you can sort of play off of that. You can even have, maybe there's a disagreement between two gods, and because your party is a bunch of people that don't follow the gods, they went to you guys to sort of mediate. It could be something as simple as that. Hey, I think it's this. He thinks it's that. We need you to go to this place and do a thing, and report back to us. We'll give you all the gold or whatever. It'd be a thing. But that's just fantasy, right? That's your classic fantasy world. What about other genres?
Well, again, you spoke into Star Wars is an interesting one because it is sci-fi and it's also like
fantasy.
High fantasy in a way.
Yeah,
it's like sci-fi with magic.
Hey, that's why it fits in those weird spots. But I mean, sci-fi. I'm a big fan of Trek, and while I don't really care for the Star Trek where they travel to the center of the universe and fight God, because that was weird. I do like the stories where they go to planets and they encounter different religions, and sometimes even warring religions that they have to step in as neutral third parties.
Yeah, in a large galactic setting, other religions are going to form that are not, your own. So it's very interesting in that regard because, you could have a very conquest based religion and, that could be some alien race that is, taking planets or, doing whatever they're doing in the name of their religion. And so like, you can have, a threat based on that. You could have like, it also allows you, again, in any setting, you can sort of, you could always incorporate, like this kind of goes in like the Eldritch horror type things. We could kind of jump ahead there, but you can always have like a god exist or something that people believe to be a god. So even in a sci-fi setting, you could have like somebody who's almost like a deity, or at least to these people, they are. The God King Xerxes. Okay.
Yeah, well, it's been said, that sufficiently advanced technology is no different from magic. So somebody who has sufficiently advanced technology would set themselves up as a god. And somebody with enough magic kind of is a god in the fantasy game. So what's the difference? And for sci-fi, that works really well. You talk about, eldritch horror. You talk about cyberpunk. AIs, those, massive AIs that sort of rule over all things, not the ones we have now that show pictures with people with anywhere from 1 to 30 fingers on a hand. Like true cyberpunk AIs. Those are very similar to like newborn gods. They've got a ton of power and they're running wild. They're doing all sorts of weird stuff. Those are great stories. And you can have a religious story that has no gods in it. Just, unknowable non-human entities that sort of rule over entire regions and war amongst themselves, and people are pawns to them. That sounds like a very the gods are having fun with the people sort of story. Just, everybody's wearing trench coats and sunglasses in the middle of the night, and there's neon everywhere. It's good times. It's got a beat.
Oh, cyberpunk.
I love my cyberpunk stories, man. Anyway, Eldritch horror or gothic horror.
This is a big popular one. I think a lot of people like running this sort of story. And again, there's a lot of different ways you can do it, but there's just a fun. Again, it incorporates just kind of these unbelievable beings into your world that are beyond comprehension in terms of their power.
Yeah, I think any sort of gothic or eldritch horror sort of really flows into those, monsters and ancient gods. The old gods, the strangest and weirdest of them. And then you've got modern fantasy. You were talking about your White Wolf.
Yeah, and in White Wolf they have their own set of it depends on which thing you're playing, but they've got their own sets of gods. Or again, as you ascend in the power rankings here, you sort of become a god in your own right, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
So I was never too keen on the vampire storylines where some vampire becomes a god, but it's a very popular live action thing. So
I watched Blade. I mean, it was a lot of years ago, but I remember. Some of the ones, like if we talk about stories, movies, the book American Gods is very good at this. You've got some of these 8 old religions have come forward, and they're real. They're all real, and they're doing their thing, and they're trying to get stuff done. That's a fun story. The Dresden Files interacts with some of the same sort of things. You get the Fey realms and, these massively powerful beings. That's an interesting thing. There are modern fantasy stories that deal with gods rather than just, what we would consider normal or common religions. And we need to look at, I didn't put it in my notes, but I think, it would probably be a good idea to talk about what's involved. We've talked about, the gods and what types of gods and what types of religions, but what makes it a religion?
Obviously it's going to be your common set of beliefs held amongst a group of people, probably a hierarchical structure of people who are priests of the religion versus followers of the religion, and then some sort of again, you said common beliefs, or I said common beliefs, but common practices that you do amongst the religion as well.
Yeah, you have specific things that people do. You have rituals or activities that are used to in the worship ceremony. If there are ceremonies, there's probably vestments or some sort of way that followers can identify each other. And all of these things sort of lead into your different types of religions. Because if you're talking about rituals, tenets, beliefs for evil characters versus good characters, good gods versus neutral gods, you really should be balancing that sort of thing in a way that makes it obvious to your players what's going on, unless you're trying to deceive your players. I think that it's, shorthand for this is a good guy and this is a bad guy should follow directly into this is a good religion and this is a bad religion when you want to tell that. Right?
Yes. Again, the nice thing with an evil religious storyline is you could always have a new religion pop up that is suddenly, filled with evil gods, and the bad NPCs are all part of that religion. That's a very common tropey storyline right there.
So let's talk about evil gods. What makes it an evil god? I think they've got the domain of something bad or harmful, right? They're in charge of something bad or harmful, or they want people to do bad things.
Yeah, I think that's pretty straightforward. I mean, again, it's just they're bad. They're effectively like the ultimate big bad guy.
Yeah.
Big bad evil guy, right? So
but the thing is with they big bad evil guys versus big bad evil gods is did you see Midnight Mass?
No.
Do you know Harry Potter?
Yes.
Okay. Who's the big bad guy in Harry Potter?
Voldemort.
And which character from Harry Potter do people hate more than Voldemort?
The lady in the pink. I don't know her name.
Exactly. Oh, now I can't remember her name. Oh. But the reason people hate her more than they hate Voldemort is because she's a more relatable character. He's, he doesn't have a mustache, but a mustache twirling villain who's, trying to kill everybody and just like rule over things. And she's just a petty, vindictive jerk.
Again, she's like the person in your office that you can't stand. Okay. And Voldemort is like somebody trying to like destroy the world. Okay.
Umbridge. Dolores Umbridge is her name. Yeah. But when we talk about evil religious characters, this is why I was saying Midnight Mass. I don't want to like super spoil it for you, but I'll just give you this, is that there is a big evil, a big bad guy. But at the end of it, yes, that was the evil, but you hate this one character, Bev, who is just a sanctimonious, overzealous, just the worst Karen you've ever met, right? And she does a great job. She is an excellent actress. The character was perfect. I love every minute of it. I hate her so much, and that is very important because she's a very religious character, right? And she's not following necessarily a bad god. And that's the difference between an evil god and an evil NPC who's religious, is that it's their selfishness, it's their own desires, it's their nature that makes them evil or makes them do evil things. they don't have to be following an evil god to do it. It helps.
That's true. They could be a vindictive evil person within a common religion, and they themselves are the bad guy or the evil person because they are poor representatives of their religion.
Yeah. Oh man, you should watch that. In fact, I recommend to all of our listeners that they should watch Midnight Mass. It's very
Let us
good.
know if Bev also drives you insane. So,
Oh, she's the best. And we talk about, so that's evil. You've got bad gods are just, they're of the domain of evil things. They want people to do evil stuff. But evil NPCs who are religious, they can follow evil gods and follow along the evil god's plan. Great. That's an evil thing. Or they could just be horrible people who are religious and use their religion to justify their evil acts. I think a good way to sort of point that out is that they ignore the plights of people outside of their religion, or they apply rules differently for people inside and outside of their religion, or they're overzealous with their application of rules, regardless of whether or not it harms somebody. Rules are rules, and we're going to do it. Those are generally bad people.
yeah, again, you can make a lot of characters. I wouldn't even say evil, but just impossible roadblocks because because of that, and people who are generally antagonistic. If you go back to our antagonist versus villain conversation, a devout religious paladin who follows very specific rules in a party of scoundrels can be that person.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's flip it over. Let's talk about good religious. Let's talk about what makes a good god.
So let's go to the opposite. They're generally helpful. They don't want to destroy the world. They want to help the world, heal the world.
Like they've got a domain of something good or helpful or healing or light or blah 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 blah. They generally want people to do good stuff. Yes, absolutely. What makes a good religious NPC?
Somebody who, so to the opposite of what you said, somebody who follows the religion, but also cares about the plights of the people. So like they're practicing their religion in a way that is helpful to the outside world.
Yeah, people who are considerate of others.
Yes.
They try to make things equitable. They try and bring balance or wholeness, or just treat people with compassion. I mean, worshiping a good god probably helps this. Worshiping evil gods and being compassionate to others kind of makes you really bad at what you're doing. But maybe it works. I don't know. Maybe you worship a god of death. Okay, let me scratch that, because I think a god of death really fits into my third column here, which is neutral gods.
That's interesting because if you look at how the faceless men were in like Game of Thrones who worship the god of death, like they weren't vindictive. They were just doing like the balancing act that was what the faceless men were. So
what needs to be done, yeah.
It just needed to be done. That was the tenets of the god. You have a neutral god here, so neutral religion. Again, gods that these kind of fit into more of like your animism type gods. Like they kind of exist. They don't have a purpose in terms of like destroying or bending the world. It's just these are the tenets of the god, and it just happens. It's like if you worshipped a typhoon. Okay.
Well, I mean, the god of the sea, Poseidon, is still in your polytheism. Not your polytheism. I'm just like in polytheism in general. I'm not ascribing the Greek gods to you, Aaron. Be weird. But neutral gods, yes, they can be in the animism where everything sort of has its own spirit. But a neutral god, I would think, is something has the domain of something either mundane. This is the god of cobblestones. Um, so we say a prayer to this god whenever we put a new street in. They're not good, they're not bad, they're there. They take care of things. Or something ubiquitous, like the god of death or the god of honeybees. Just like they're in charge of all of them. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. They sit there, they don't care. I like neutral gods for stories, not as pushing a story, not as creating sort of action, but as sort of existing within the space to fill in some stuff. Like they're here, they do stuff, they've got their worshipers maybe, but they're like, I don't know why people keep on worshiping me. I'm just going to do what I'm going to do. I'm not going to make them do anything about it. But maybe they've got, they protect their worshipers because they have them, especially against the evil or even the good gods.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And again, it's an interesting balancing act with these sorts of gods too, because again, they are themselves gods in your game. So if you ascribe a level of power to the gods, you have like very unmotivated gods, like one way or the other. They sort of just do what they do, which means like if you mess with what they have, then you incur their wrath.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about, religions need to have tenets. They need to have these sort of beliefs or systems or rituals. And I think that, evil gods having evil tenets and evil rituals and just being sort of dickish. Good religions should have good rituals, and so on and so forth. Neutral gods should be fairly simplistic. They may have a religious ceremony they got to do, but it would be something that they would do anyway. Something boring, something standard.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe something just as ubiquitous as the thing that the god is in charge of.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. I mean, that's again, within a good storyline. If you're going to incorporate the gods, you'll likely have conflict between a more morally good god versus a more morally bad god. Okay. And then if you are going to do that, to be able to throw in these neutral gods, which are sort of agnostic to agnostic, I'm looking for apathetic to the whole situation of what's going on between the conflict between these two gods. That's interesting in and of itself. Also, what can motivate one of these gods to swing one way or the other? Like that's also interesting to have within the conflict as well, which allows the players to maybe be able to plead with a neutral god and give them more motivation to do good or evil.
Yeah. Well, and I think that if we're going to talk about sort of religious story points, you where do you fit these gods into? Having sort of this the knowledge of the pantheon and their tenets and their followers and how these things sort of fit in and why they exist is going to make it a lot easier for you to tell a story that incorporates these gods and their followers. I think that if we're going to talk about, having clerics or paladins in a game, knowing them, knowing what they're supposed to be doing is going to add, like I said earlier, it's going to add that level of role playing to the character. Why are they doing what they're doing? What sort of things do they need to accomplish? How do they interact with people? But take that extra step. Put those other religions into your world as well. Have your players interact with these organizations or just normal people walking the street. The gods in these fantasy games, in these sci-fi games, in these cyberpunk games, they exist. They're as real as you want them to be. And I think adding more options to your game, adding more elements to your game, where it's helpful, can make the game more interesting.
I agree. That's the key. If I could sum up the entire podcast, the entire Level Up Your Gaming podcast repertoire, it would be that. Being able to add more aspects to your game makes your game more interesting, makes your game more well-rounded, and makes your game more makes for telling better stories.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have anything else you want to add to this, Josh?
I think we should all spend time trying to make better stories.
I agree. So if you have any thoughts on religion in your games or a religious storyline, let us know. Level Up Your Gaming Podcast at gmail.com or facebook.com/Level Up Your Gaming. Also, the podcast is on YouTube, so smash the like button there. You can subscribe to the podcast, your favorite podcasting site, review it, recommend it to a friend, all those good things. And that'll wrap us up for the week. So for Josh, I'm Aaron. Have a good week, everyone.
Bye.